Have you ever, like, really sat down and thought, do I need counseling to make this relationship work?
Yeah, it's a question a lot of people grapple with.
Totally. And today we're going to dive deep into that, figure out when it's the right call,
Mm.
and when maybe, just maybe, you can DIY it.
Awesome. You actually sent me some research that I think is super helpful for this conversation.
Exactly. So, like, we're going to break it all down, right? Figure out the ins and outs of relationship counseling, when it shines, and when, other paths might be better.
Sounds great. To get started, I think it's helpful to kind of define what relationship counseling really is.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think a lot of people see it as like the fix-it solution,
Right. Right.
but it's more about giving you the tools and skills to, handle those relationship bumps in the road.
So it's less about slapping a Band-Aid on the problem and more about, like, becoming your own relationship surgeon.
Exactly. It's like you're building a toolbox, right?
Yeah.
Filled with communication skills, ways to understand your partner's point of view, and how to fight fair, all that good stuff.
I like that analogy. Now, the research you sent me, it mentioned a few issues that often bring couples to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Things like communication problems, trust issues, always fighting. Is that like everyone, or does it just feel that way?
Oh, no, those are super common. Most couples are going to run into at least one of those at some point.
Okay. Phew.
Mhm.
Glad to know it's not just me.
And one thing that comes up a lot is something called negative sentiment override.
Say what now?
It's a fancy way of saying that you're so used to the negative that you start misinterpreting your partner's intentions.
Ah, okay. So even when they're trying to be nice, you're like, wait, what's the catch?
Exactly. And that's where those counseling tools come in super handy. And, there isn't just one type of counseling.
Oh, right.
So there's couples therapy, where you both go together and focus on the relationship as a whole.
Gotcha.
Then there's individual therapy, where one person might go to work on stuff that's affecting the relationship.
Like if, say, one person has anxiety that makes it hard for them to open up.
Exactly. They could learn to manage their anxiety, and that'd naturally improve communication in the relationship.
Makes sense.
And then there's premarital counseling, which is more about building a solid foundation from the get-go.
Right. Preventative stuff. I'm curious, though, can you give us an example of, like, a couple who went to counseling and really saw a positive change? A success story, so to speak.
Definitely. Let's say we have a couple who just can't stop arguing about money.
Oh, money fights, those are the worst.
Right. Each person feels unheard, maybe a little resentful, like they're carrying the weight of the world financially.
Totally.
And so in counseling, they learn techniques like active listening. It's all about really hearing what your partner's saying, without interrupting or jumping in with your own defenses.
So instead of a shouting match, they actually start listening to each other.
Exactly. And that leads to empathy, to understanding, and suddenly they're more willing to compromise.
Makes sense.
And from there, maybe they create a budget together, addressing each person's needs and goals. It turns into collaboration, not conflict.
I love that.
Hmm.
From fighting to teamwork.
Yeah.
But the research did mention that sometimes counseling isn't strictly necessary.
Right.
So what's your take on that? When might you not need the whole therapy thing?
Well, sometimes couples have these little disagreements, right? And if both are willing to put in the effort, they can probably figure it out on their own.
So if I keep forgetting to take out the trash, we don't necessarily need to book a therapist.
Exactly. If you're self-aware and willing to adjust your behavior, sometimes that's enough.
Right. Right.
And even individual growth can make a huge difference.
Like working on my communication skills is going to benefit any relationship, right?
Totally. There's that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not taking care of yourself, you can't give to others.
I like that. Okay, so what about alternatives to counseling? What if someone's not ready for therapy or maybe can't afford it right now?
Oh, there are tons of options. There are amazing workshops out there.
Oh, yeah. Like the Gottman Institute has these workshops that teach you practical communication skills.
Cool.
They even teach you how to use those I statements so you can express your feelings without blaming your partner.
That's a good one. I feel like I've heard people recommend relationship books too.
Books can be super helpful. Just make sure you're choosing authors who are, reputable.
Right. Make sure the advice is actually good advice.
Exactly. And support groups are another great option.
Yeah.
They can give you that sense of community, that feeling that you're not alone in this.
It's like a shared experience, right?
Yeah. You can learn from each other, support each other.
Okay, so lots of options. But let's say you're in a relationship and you're like, is this a therapy situation? How do you actually know?
Well, the biggest thing is that both partners need to be on board.
You can't drag someone to therapy.
It won't work.
Mhm.
Counseling takes effort from both sides. You both got to be willing to do the work.
Gotcha. So it's a two-way street. It is. It's also important to figure out if it's actually a relationship issue or if one person's going through something individually.
Right, so not just using your partner as a therapist.
Exactly. Sometimes you need to address your own stuff first, and then you got to consider the complexity of the issue.
What do you mean?
Think of it like this. A leaky faucet, you can probably fix that yourself, but a burst pipe, you need a plumber.
Okay, I get it.
So counseling's more for those ingrained patterns, those recurring conflicts that keep coming back no matter what you try.
Makes sense. So we've got individual readiness, actual relationship issues, and how complicated the problem is. Anything else?
It's also good to think about support outside of therapy. Friends and family can offer emotional support,
True, true.
but they also might have biases. So keep that in mind. And don't forget about community resources, although those can be a bit hit or miss depending on where you live.
Right, right. Okay, so big takeaway.
Yeah.
Counseling can be amazing, but it's not always the answer, and definitely not always the first answer. Lots to think about for sure.
It is. And here's something else to consider. Regardless of whether you choose counseling or a different path, what does it look like for you to really invest in your relationship? What little step can you take today to, build that connection?
Ooh, that's a good one. And remember, even if you do decide to seek professional help, that's not a sign of weakness.
Definitely not.
It shows you care, you're committed, and you're willing to do what it takes to build a stronger, healthier relationship.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought, some stuff to ponder as you navigate your own relationship journey.
I hope so.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
See you next time.